We had 11 new cards revealed this week for the upcoming Into the Inklands set, which is dropping on February 23rd. Reveal season is a very exciting time for Disney Lorcana, but I know because sets come out every few months, it can be very intimidating to keep up with it. So every week, I'm going to come here and tell you what my opinion is about these new cards and how they may affect the existing and future metagame for Disney Lorcana. Heal What Has Been Heard is a 3-cost song that allows you to remove up to 3 damage from chosen character and draw a card. Now, this draws a lot of parallels to Rapunzel, gifted with healing. So Heal Has What Been Heard has the distinct ability to heal and draw a card, and its cost, of course, can be mitigated by exerting a 3-cost character, same as all songs, of course. And this card is considered a miniature version of Rapunzel. Although it provides cycling and potential card advantage with the healing, I think it's going to be challenged to find a place in the current metagame. I just think it's not powerful enough. I'm not sure it does enough to justify its inclusion in decks, maybe as a one-of. But unlike Rapunzel, you don't actually have to remove damage to draw a card, but you can only ever draw 1 card from it. So I'm not really sure it's powerful enough. If you want to cycle a song right now, you have cards like the Roses card that gives -1 power to two characters, and I think that's just more efficient at cycling through to draw a card. So Stitch Little Rocket enters the scene as a 2-cost uninkable character with 3 strength, 1 willpower, 1 lore, and the rush ability. The rush ability combined with 3 strength gives us some strong numbers in our current world dominated by 2 willpower. The problem I have is that this card is uninkable, which means you have to find room for it instead of just typically auto-including in your deck. If you look at Stitch like a 2-cost, 3 damage removal action, he's fine anytime throughout the game. The problem is you'll need to go against an exerted target, similar to the Rapunzel problem that we've talked about in the past. You have to have characters you're able to challenge in order to actually make use out of cards like this. I'm not sure he's much better than like Queen of Hearts Impulsive Roar, the 2/2 rush character currently that's in the metagame. That it's basically taking out the same types of characters, but has inkable status on her. Obviously, he does more damage, so that means in the later game, when you're trying to take out more medium to high level willpower characters, he may have a place if you're using him as that pseudo action. But overall, on curve, I still think Queen of Hearts will compete with him because there isn't much you're really going to want to take out. I don't think using him to take out a 1/3 for 1 is efficient use of your ink. So time will tell if Stitch being uninkable will see play in the metagame. Ursula Deceiver is a 2-cost inkable character with 1 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore, and a unique ability. And she takes the center stage in this week's reveals. She flavorably forces opponents to reveal their hands and discard a song card of their choice. So it's like when she took Ariel's voice away and she wasn't able to sing anymore from The Little Mermaid. So Emerald Steel right now is a powerful spot in the current metagame, oftentimes keeping Ruby Amethyst down when it's faced against it. But the weakness that Emerald Steel has had is to other steel decks, specifically cards like Grab Your Swords. So Ursula answers that problem. And so while many decks might only run 8 to 12 songs, they often represent the most problematic cards that you can run into as an Emerald deck. Ursula just pairs perfectly with cards like Lucifer, often clearing the way for when he enters play to be able to hit 2 cards, because oftentimes when you play Lucifer, when you're the one playing Lucifer, your opponent's simply going to discard a song card if they have one in hand, because they can discard 1 action card instead of 2 other cards. Well, Ursula can take that song card away from them, so that when Lucifer hits the table, he's more likely to hit 2 cards instead of just 1. Obviously, the future of a whole new set is impossible to know, but if the past is any indicator, any non-song action needs to have tremendous impact currently to see play. The only ones that immediately come to mind that are not songs that actually see play are cards like Smash, Hypnotize, and Dragonfire off the top of my head. So everything else that sees play as an action is a song, which means Ursula is going to be able to hit all of them. So I actually believe out of all the cards we're going to talk about this week, it's potential that Ursula is going to have the largest impact on the metagame outside of anything that has to do with the location type cards we're going to talk about in a bit. Distract, chosen character gets -2 strength this turn, draw a card for 2 ink out of Sapphire. This card is simply a limited card only. I wouldn't bother with it in your constructed decks. So we won't spend too much time on it. The Sorcerer's Hat is a 2-cost inkable item that for 1 ink and exert it, you can name a card, then reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a named card, put that card in your hand. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck. The one thing I want to mention is it's very important to understand what Steve Warner's ruling with this card was. For any character, or technically any location, also because they also have subtitles. All that matters is the main part of the card. So like Mickey Mouse, Brave Little Tailor. All that matters is you say Mickey Mouse. That means using Sorcerer's Hat and just saying Mickey Mouse, you obviously have a lot of different versions to hit. This really increases the power level of this card, as you could realistically play a deck centered around 1 to 2 characters and name them and just hope to hit. There's currently 2 ways to consistently hit with this card. You have Ursula's Cauldron and Reflection. The Cauldron was a staple during the first chapter, but it's simply too slow and because of its uninkable nature in the current metagame. So while a 2-card combo to guarantee a card draw each turn may seem inefficient, ultimately it does simply become draw a card for 1 ink once you have both of them in play each turn, after you pay the initial cost of 2 to get out the hat and 2 to get out the Cauldron, for example. And since Sorcerer's Hat is inkable, some of the pressure that Cauldron puts on your deck construction is kind of mitigated because your ultimate draw engine is going to be inkable. I think Reflection is actually really interesting with this card. If you have a hat in play and you play Reflection, which you can technically sing for free, but I don't think that's going to happen very often because it only costs 1, and exerting the character is probably just not worth it, to be honest with you. You'll then just immediately be able to draw 1 card off the hat. Because you'll be able to set up the top 3 cards of your deck. Then on the next turn, you'll draw the middle card basically as your card for the turn. And then the 3rd card, you can just use the hat for again. So it almost turns Reflection into a guaranteed draw 2 that's delayed over 2 turns. Now, is that great? Maybe not, but it's pretty cheap for what you're doing overall to guarantee yourself drawing 2 extra cards than your opponent. And really gives Sorcerer's Hat, in my opinion, a lot of play. Lastly, the Sorcerer's Hat that I haven't seen anyone say yet, Sorcerer's Hat combos with itself. If you have 2 Sorcerer's Hats in play, you call the top card. Let's say it's incorrect, because most of the time it's probably just going to be incorrect because you're just guessing into the wind, unless you use one of the above methods that we talked about. But then what's basically going to happen is the second hat you can just activate because the card, when you miss, goes right back on top. You know exactly what the card's going to be. So if you spend the 4 ink to play 2 hats, and obviously 2 cards are your hand, from now on, you're going to draw a card for 2, which is half the cost of Magic Mirror, which saw a lot of play in the first chapter metagame. And honestly, you're talking about inkable cards here instead of uninkable like Magic Mirror. Jim Hawkins, Space Traveler. He's a 4/4 with 2 lore for 5 ink, who has 2 abilities on it. This is it. When you play this character, you may play a location with 4 or less for free, and take the helm, which is whenever you play a location, this character can move there for free. So as of this recording, we've only seen 2 locations so far, but the potential for Jim Hawkins Spell Traveler is massive.
I think there's 2 things that need to happen. The first thing is Amethyst or Ruby cannot have a truly good location. That's the first thing. The second thing is they cannot have any cards that interact with locations.
Although the move to a location cost, that second part, the take the helm, is unlikely to really ever be above 2, probably. I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be really tough to ever pay more than that to move a character to a location, especially when you have to pay a cost to play the location to begin with. But I can see the locations themselves that will have a 4 cost or above. So Jim is kind of like we said on the podcast this week. He's kind of like a singer for locations, which is pretty interesting. I think most people are kind of looking at Jim and saying, okay, I'm just going to play him and then play like a big, powerful location out there at once and then discount the overall cost of him like down to basically like a 4/4/2, like for free, basically. Because if let's just say there is a 4 cost location that exists and it costs 1 to move to, you're basically getting all that cost straight back just by playing Jim. So I think what's going to be more important, however, is just being able to get multiple locations out over time. So if you play more than 1, he can just get more of them out over time. And you're just going to build an entire treasure map of locations. See what I did there? So yeah, Jim has a lot of potential. He's the first legendary we've seen out of the set. And then it wouldn't surprise me if he was one of the most played and most powerful that's out there. Just because of how much like essential virtual ink discount you get through playing this card. Ravensburger had a live stream last Friday, and they started showing a bunch of other cards. This Pongo Determined Father, this comes from, it's one of the starter deck cards, so it's one of the guaranteed, I assume it's going to be the foil that's in one of the starter deck cards. So this is our second version of Pongo. He's 3 power, 3 strength, 2 willpower for 3 with 1 lore for 3 cost. Storyborn hero. He has the ability Twilight Bark. Once per turn, you may pay 2 ink to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, put it in your hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. So Pongo's an interesting character. Like, I really wish he was a 3/3 to survive all the 2 damage actions that are out there. But I see Pongo more as a later game play instead of playing him on curve. Like, if you can drop him after an AoE or a board wipe, like a grab your swords or be prepared, you'll have the ability to draw back into the game as time goes on. So even playing Pongo as like a pseudo 5-cost card where you use his ability right away when you play him and you are able to hit the card, he's kind of like a 3/2 that draws a card when he comes into play with 1 lore, which is pretty good value for what you're getting because his upside is that if he does survive that turn, you're able to keep drawing that card every turn out from their end. I think time will tell if his 2 willpower will keep him down. But he is such a good boy, and I think he can see play after board wipes and may force additional board wipes on his own. That I think he probably will see play as a 1-of in most Amber builds at the least. Dalmatian Puppy Tailwagger. Now, this is a 2 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lure for 2 ink that's inkable. And has the ability, where do they all come from? You may have up to 99 copies of Dalmatian Puppy Tailwagger in your deck. And I didn't include all 4 copies. Is it 4? Yeah. I didn't include all 4 or 5. I think it's actually 5 copies of the art for this card on the screen. But there are 5 different versions of this card. They're all the same. That's why you can play so many in their deck. But you can play like whatever art versions you want. Of course, they're all extremely cute. But as of right now, unless there's actually a payoff for having multiple puppies in play or a bunch of the same named character outside of that Sorcerer's Hat that we talked about earlier, right now there just isn't a lot of payoff for playing this many puppies in your deck or playing a deck that's larger than 60 cards just to be able to use that ability. If there is something that says like gain a lore for every puppy in play or all your puppies gain X number of strength or something like that, then we might be talking about something different. I was hoping that him and Pongo would have like the dog trait or something like that, but they don't have that. So we'll see what happens. If there's anything that's going to combo with this, I think it's going to be if there's a Perdita card that maybe gives an ability to all your puppies, or there may be additional named puppies out there. So if that's the case, then we'll revisit the Tailwagger. But as it stands right now, unless there's a payoff for playing these puppies, I can't see them unfortunately hitting the 60 card landscape. Moana Born Leader, similar to Pongo, is another one of the cards that comes from the starter deck. Because she's the rare, I don't actually think she will be foiled, but I might be wrong. So this is Moana Born Leader. She's a 5-cost, 4/4 with 2 lore. She's a Floodborn hero, princess, captain. She has shift 3, so it's our first shiftable Moana. And she has the ability, Welcome to my boat. Whenever this character quests while at a location, ready all other characters here. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. So she has to move to a location and then only interacts with other cards at the location. And she's our first Floodborn Moana. The problem is that each other Moana also costs 5 that we know about. So until we see a cheaper one, she's likely only to come into play for her full cost. I mean, discounted if you have another Moana in play, but I can't see that happening because they're not in Ruby currently. So Moana is a location payoff card, but requires you to have spent ink over time to move her and other characters to a location. Then wait a turn to quest with her, just so you can ready all your other characters. Now, that's a powerful ability, but it takes a lot of setup to move a bunch of different characters to the same location. As of right now, with the 2 locations we've seen, they both cost 1 to move to, which means you're going to have to pay 1 for each one of those characters to move to that location over time. Then Moana has to obviously move herself over there for 1 and then quest with her. Now, because she has shift 3, you might have been able to move an earlier version of Moana there, and you might be able to quest right away if you're able to shift her in. So I think a lot of her value really depends if we see a Moana within Ruby, likely, or within at least the color that you want to pair Ruby with, hint, Amber, in this situation. If we see a cheaper one that she can shift onto, then we might be talking. But for now, I think it's just a lot of setup to get her ability to work, but I'm hoping there's ways to make her work in the future. Scrooge McDuck is a super rare. And he is also in the starter, so he is definitely going to be a foil that's in the deck. So this is Scrooge McDuck, richest duck in the world. He's a 5-cost, uninkable, 3 strength, 5 willpower. He has 2 abilities and 1 lore. I'm coming home. During your turn, this character gains evasive. And I don't get rich by being stupid. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play an item for free. He's a really hard card to evaluate, in my opinion, given the current state of items. So currently, the highest cost for items that see any play, and I think maybe even just in general, is 4. So while Scrooge may save you that hefty cost in the mid to late game, his stat line and uninkable nature means that that line of play is unlikely to be good enough. Like cards like Bell, Inventive Engineer, and cards like Mauis, World Famous Inventor, they never really saw play outside of casual decks. And Scrooge, unfortunately, seems to be more in the vein of those cards than in the vein of like Flaversham, who sees play in all item decks. He simply has too many conditions to make him work. 3 strength just isn't enough to take out most characters. He doesn't have evasive at all times, which means it's going to be easy to challenge into him. You're probably only going to get his ability to go off once. Now, if there's some 10 cost item that allows you to play that for free that comes out, or even like, a 6 or 7 cost item, I can see him seeing play. But it's going to be really tough given the current state of items that you're going to want to play like a 4 cost item given his conditions. He has to be able to banish a character for 3 that only has 3 strength. Granted, you have things like support, so he may be able to see play there. But in my opinion, it's a lot to set up to basically play an item for free that you might be able to afford just by not. The last card revealed this week was Maui's Place of Exile, Hidden Island. This is a 2 cost location that has 5 willpower, 1 cost to move to that location, and has the ability Isolated. Characters gain resist 1 while here. This is our second location from Into the Inklands, and the first that gives us a real reason to want to move to it. I think this card is really interesting because unlike Cogsworth, which this is being compared to, Maui's Place of Exile is more limited as to how it can actually be affected by the characters that it's helping. You simply can't be prepared away Cogsworth and all the guys that he's, giving that resist 1 to all at once. So in this example, like the Cogsworth being Maui's Place of Exile in this example, will stay on the table. In other words, your opponent basically has to make a choice as to how they're going to deal with your different diversified threats that are in play. And I think this is really where locations are always going to shine, especially ones that have abilities for when characters are there. Your opponent's going to have to make a tough decision as to whether or not they want to deal with the location itself or the characters, because they might not be able to deal with both. What I will say is that ironically, Maui Hero to All can swing into this and take it out, but that's wasting Maui's entire turn and leaving him pretty vulnerable to being challenged back for not a lot of value. So the characters that are hanging out at Maui's Place of Exile after you've moved them there are still going to be in play to do whatever they want. So Maui's basically just going to be swinging directly into this. So unless you have additional rush factor characters, moving there and getting that resist 1 is going to build up value over time. You basically wouldn't have to play a bunch of other characters that have resist, and those characters are kind of like awkwardly costed at times because they have that ability built into them. You just have to pay an extra 1 to move them there. Cogsworth costs 5. This ultimately is going to cost 2 plus 1. I wish this location kind of had lore on it, but I guess it would be too powerful compared, especially to like when the Forbidden Mountain that we've seen already. So I understand why this doesn't actually represent a total threat, but your opponent's going to have to deal with it, which gives it a lot of tempo to any kind of deck. But I really believe that in the end, this is the way that a lot of locations are going to play out. They're tempo-based cards where your opponent force a decision on your opponent as to how they want to deal with it. Do they want to deal with the location, or do they want to deal with the characters that are getting benefit from it? So time will tell as we see more locations if this one will see play as well. That was all the cards that we saw revealed this week for Into the Inklands. Like I said, I know it can be really intimidating to study all the set all at once. So I want to break these down on a weekly basis so you don't get overwhelmed with 204 cards all at once. What was your favorite card revealed this week? Let me know in the comments below. If you do like this kind of content and you want me to continue to go over these cards on a weekly basis, please hit that like button to really let me know that this is the type of content that you're looking for. And if you're not, tell me in the comments below as well. If you want to wait till all the end and evaluate everything all at once instead of kind of going through it one by one, just let me know. I'm here for you. Till next time, see ya from the Forbidden Mountain.